Hello there! Welcome to my channel. This is the middle in my review series on the Penstar N10 Pro, or on Amazon it was labeled the eNote 2. And basically this is what I call a visual tour. So to put that into context, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to go through and show what the device can do. And as I go through that process, you do get a sense of what it's like to interact with the device, you know, how snappy it is and that sort of thing. But the idea of the video is less about being a review, although I might make kind of an occasional comment here or there, but it's really just this is what the device does. So it's more of a neutral view to get a sense of what features and functionality exists, because you really can't get that from the marketing materials or from other videos. So this is really meant to kind of plug that gap and give a really good sense of what it's like to use the device and what the device offers. It is a longer video, and because of that, I definitely put in chapters so you can go ahead and zip ahead to the areas that interest you. But it's good to go through the entire thing if you're really interested in purchasing the device, because at the end of the video, you're going to have an excellent sense of what's available on the device. So, having said all that, let's just jump right on in and start looking at what the Penstar has to offer. Okay, so here we are. We're going to start off talking about navigation, because that's really a critical distinguishing feature of this device. And as noted, there's no touch input. I can, put my hand on this anywhere I want. It's not going to do anything. The only way to navigate is really through the use of the stylus, and it's through the use of these buttons. So let's explore that. Now, as it relates to stylus, this is not a traditional EMR stylus, a Wacom stylus that you see on a lot of other e-ink devices. So in order to do the navigation on this device, you have to use this stylus. That might partly explain why they send two of them, which is fairly unusual, and it might be because without this stylus, you literally can't use the device in most respects. You still have some navigation, of course, with the buttons, but not having the stylus is a significant hindrance. So with the stylus, basically, you can just tap on things, and that's how you can navigate through. So for example, if I wanted to go to settings, I would tap onto settings, and now I'm in the settings screen. So the input from the stylus is fairly straightforward. It's just tapping, and that works throughout the screen, and we'll see that as we actually go through the different elements of the device. What's a little more complicated are the buttons. Now the buttons, essentially, you can think of them as replacing screen gestures. So a lot of devices would have gestures where maybe I drop down, or I swipe up, or I swipe from the side. So these buttons can replicate that, but it can do a lot more than that. And so it is really kind of a very interesting way of navigating the device in total. Now if I click on this first button, I currently have that programmed so that it would show the list of what's available. And the only button that's not programmable is this back button. So the back button is basically static. If you click back, it will take you back one step, and if I hold it, it will refresh the screen. So that functionality, it never changes regardless of the context or how you edit the other buttons. But you can basically change all the other buttons. And if you click on this edit, we can see what the options are that are available. And so let's start over here. So basically, there's a lot of different options that you can basically put into one of these slots. And right now we can see that the home slot is highlighted. I can change that. And here's page 1, and we can go to page 2, and there's additional items here. Some of them are kind of obvious. Some of them you have to kind of understand what they're saying. For example, this recent button is actually a shortcut into the task manager tray. So we see I've got that button here. Let's go ahead and get out of this. And actually click on the home button, and now I will click on this button, and now here I am in the task manager, and it's called recent. So there is a little bit of a language barrier there that you do have to kind of understand But most of the buttons, I would say, are pretty much what you would expect them to be, and you can see the list there. Now, in addition to that, you have these ellipses on the side, and if you click on that, what you'll see is basically other applications that are on the device, and presumably if we added additional applications, they would appear here. So you can make these shortcuts to some of your apps as well, Kindle, for example. So a lot of great customization. Now, the way that this works is that you have your default list, but you also have button assignments when you're in the native Notes app and in the native Reading app. And those could be different than what you've got as your default. So you either select different buttons because you want them to do different things in the app, or if you want them always to be the same, then you'd have to go in and change those appropriately. And that's fairly easy to do. So we can see here slightly different layout for the notes. And if we go into the reader, there's a slightly different layout here as well. But again, all of these can be modified. So that's one of the definitely interesting aspects of this device is the use of these buttons as a replacement for gesture navigations. And I would say that overall, because there are so many buttons and because there are so many options that can be assigned to each button, ultimately there's a lot more options available using this system than there is using a gesture system. So that's definitely an advantage to these buttons. And between the stylus and the buttons, there is your overall navigation. So next we're going to focus on the drop-down bars, and there's two of them. On the left side, on this top bar on the screen, you get your notifications, and we can see I don't have any currently. On the right side is then kind of your drop-down menu. And this is pretty similar to what we see on other devices, but we'll walk through it real quickly. If I click on this little icon here, you can actually edit the shortcuts that are available, and currently everything is available. We can see it's on 2 pages. The gear will take you into settings. And then you've got your toggles here for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And then if we go through the buttons, home basically takes you to the home screen. Cast is a mirrorcast option, so you can project this screen onto another device, but you have to have a receiving device in order to achieve that. You have your refresh button here. Speed up presumably gets rid of a little bit of RAM. Then if we go ahead and go back, we have recent tasks, which is your task manager. You've got split view. The way that split view operates is that it operates either with the reading app or with one of your other apps. And it basically creates a situation where the other half of the screen, let's go ahead and go in the reading app to show an example of this. The other half of the screen will then be a note-taking application. So we'll go ahead and do this where it's on the bottom. And then the way that you get out of this is that you have to click on this back button here. So we'll go ahead and do that. And that's an example of the split screen in action. And if we come back to the menu, we can rotate the screen. You can actually rotate this regardless of the application you're in. So let's go ahead and click on that. And you can see there's some options here. Including I can just go ahead and manually rotate it just the way I want. Let's go ahead and get back to where we were, like so. There you go. And then you have mark screen. And mark screen basically is it takes an image of the screen that you're on, and then you can write on it and then save that image. So that's what that does, as opposed to screenshot, which is literally just a picture of the image with no writing. You do have the ability in some applications to scroll, where it's not just what you see on the screen, but you can actually scroll down. And then you can also pick what buttons you want on your button bar here. And if we go back, we also have the ability to lock. That's with a passcode. And then you have mute and airplane. Down below is your sound toggle. And then below that, you can have universal pen style. So whatever you set here would then be used in the note-taking app as well as the reading app or anywhere else where you have stylus input. You can set it globally here. And then you have different themes, light and reading, which honestly I'm not quite sure how reading differs. But dark is clearly what you would expect it to be. Now that's pretty much your drop-down bar, but there is one other exception, and we're going to go ahead and go into this app, like Kindle, for example. Get that to launch. Okay, and I'm going to swipe down. Here we go. And you'll notice that there is now an additional section, and this is where you would go have your e-ink refresh modes. So the device generally defaults to an HD mode, and there's no toggle for that. But within the context of an app, you have 5 selections that you can choose from that would essentially balance between screen quality and refresh rates and ghosting and so on. So you can kind of play with these modes in different apps to get them to perform ideally in the way that that works for you. So here in the Kindle app, I picked clearness, which gives me very few little ghosting, and the display is pretty good. And you can see it's designed to flipping through text. That's why I selected it for Kindle, and it seems to work pretty well. If I don't like the refreshness of it, if I think it's a little sluggish, then I can try for one of the faster ones, but that might introduce a little bit more ghosting as a result. But that overall is what the drop-down does on this device. Okay, next on our tour, let's take a look at the settings that are available on the device. And we'll go ahead and click on that gear icon there. And first off, here on top, you have the ability to kind of log in. I haven't logged in an account at this point because I wanted to see what the device was capable of without an account. In addition to that, you can see some specifics about my particular device. And then we start here with kind of the general setting items, and then we have some other categories we'll explore as well. So the first is your date and time. And this is pretty straightforward. You can set time automatically, you can set your time zone, etc. So not a lot unusual there. You have your sound settings next, and there they are. And you can actually continue to play even when you're in a sleep status. So that is an interesting feature I haven't generally seen. Here is the apps that are available on the app shortcut widget on the screen. So right now it features these 6 apps, but I could remove any of those or add any of them below. So let's go home. I'm referring specifically to this section here. So in the settings, you can set those there. You can also set those by clicking on this icon. Let's go back into the settings. Okay, we have wallpaper and display. There's the wallpaper I've chosen. If we click on that, then and we go to customize, then there are a number, well, these are the images that you have on the device. But if we go over here to more, these are the ones that you can download, and there's a small number. There's 4 plus 2 more here at the bottom. Okay. And then you can set your screensaver as well. You can use all sorts of documents to set your screensaver. And let's go ahead and keep going. You can also have a different image when you power off, and that is the one that's used by default. If we just click on the customize, again, it takes you to your gallery with your existing images. Here I have a couple of screenshots and an item that I downloaded onto the device. So you have some flexibility there. If we continue back to the menu, here's your password security. So yes, you can enter a 6-digit password. There is no fingerprint sensor on the device. And then you can indicate when you want the password to be required. Here is your battery settings. So you can have your cover activate your device if it's on sleep mode or not. Here you can set the auto sleep, and there's no off option, so you can go from 5 minutes to 2 hours. And then you have your power off option, which you do have an off option, or you can go 1 to 48 hours. Let's keep going. Here's another place where you can set your buttons, and we've seen a number of those already. So we'll keep going. Stylus settings. You can calibrate your stylus. You can set your buttons. Let's click on that for a second. You can see that it defaults to B5. So if I click this on, they have another stylus called the B6, and the B6 has multiple buttons. So you can see that there. But the device that comes, or the stylus that comes with it, is the B5. In the B5, we can go ahead and make touching either an eraser, a marker pen, or touch to navigate. And so that's what we have by default. And the stylus has its own firmware update separate from the system update, and this is where you would check that. Let's go ahead and check to see if we're up to date. Great, we're good. All right, then we have our refresh settings. So the only toggle here is back to home refresh. So when you go to the home screen, it'll refresh the screen automatically. Here I have it set to off. And then finally, you've got your user manual, which is opened up in their documents. And the table of contents is 4 pages, but if we go ahead and go into the welcome, you can see it's about 81 pages, which isn't too bad. Let's go ahead and go back home because we have more setting menus to go over. So let's go ahead and now we're going to settings specific to the reading app. So we've got continuous page turning available, and there's really no options here, so that's kind of interesting. And then we can use, we can download, or rather we can load different fonts. You can see you can import them there. So that's there. And under network, there's where you can set Wi-Fi. You've got some advanced settings here. You've got your Bluetooth settings. And again, screen mirroring, which again is the Miracast. If we go to storage, there's basically just going over the status of your storage. Here we see I've only used about 3 gigabytes. And finally, if we go to the system, then there are a number of options. We can do our system update here, clear temporary files, reset the device. Here's the display options. So again, this is the same as when we did the drop-down bar. There's some legal information. You can set your language. Let's go ahead. Those are the options. It's not extensive. Oops. Let's go back in. There's your input method, which only has one option. You can set feedback in case there's a particular issue you have with the device, and then you can see your history of feedback there. And then finally, you've got your battery here, and there's no detail to it. It's just repeating what we see up here. And those are the settings that are available on this device. So let's talk a little bit about the home screen, and you can see we're here, both it says home and it's also highlighted. There's a number of widgets here as well as the search feature. If I click on the search feature, then I can either search just generally across the device, specific to notes, books, or my documents. This can search on handwriting if that is selected in the settings, and we'll see where that's possible later. But generally, it's looking for titles. We also have this kind of calendar application, which is what you select over here. This icon allows you to change the image on the square, and it doesn't change, it's static when you set it. You have widgets for notes and bookshelf, which also corresponds to these icons here, and the apps icon corresponds to this area here. Email is separate, as is files, and then this is actually a calendar that we can drill into. So that's basically what the home screen offers. Okay, so let's go ahead and dig on into the calendar. And the only way to go into the calendar is to click on this icon here, and then this is what the calendar looks like. So you can see your kind of monthly view there. You've got the ability to add an event. So let's go ahead and do that to see what that looks like. So there is basically your toggles for that. And then you can add any type of notes you want here. You can change your month here by clicking on the month icon where you can change the year and the month, or you can just advance ahead using the arrows. If we do this more button, there's a couple other things you can do. You can search, you can sync to cloud if you're on their account. And if we go into settings, then you can see what those settings are there. So pretty basic calendaring app. And we'll go ahead and go back to August. So here's a date with a dot on it. So if I click on that dot, you can see I've got a little event that I created there. and then also my memo is there as well. So a somewhat limited calendar app. There's no integration that I can see with Outlook, Google, etc. It's just on this device, and it's pretty much limited to the events and the memos that you create here in the app. Okay, so the applications down here, you can go into your app drawer either by clicking anywhere in this top bar or by clicking on this icon over here. This icon here allows you to determine which of the 6 apps will be displayed here, and these are all shortcuts. So if I click on this, for example, it'll take me right into the browser. But let's go ahead and just click on that, and we can see all of the apps on the device. These are all the system apps which are there by default. And then we can go into installed apps, and here you can see the apps that I've downloaded plus their app store. And if we click on that, we can see what's available. Here's the first page of the reading app. Here's a few more. We go over to news. That's what's available there. Under tools, we only have one item. Under Office, we have some Microsoft applications here. Interestingly, including Outlook, which would be separate from the email app on the device. Here's a couple items under Learning, and finally under Others, that's what's available there. So, but we do see here there's another Android app store you could install. I haven't installed it, so I don't know what's available on those stores, but that's what's basically available by default on the device. There's no connection to Google Play. If I click on this More button over here, you can install APKs onto the device, and this is kind of where you would do that. And I will not test that in my testing, but theoretically that is available. So that in a nutshell is the apps on this device. Okay, let me just say a few quick words about their email application, which is only available via this widget. And essentially, it's a fairly straightforward email client. You can go ahead and log in to your existing account. What we see here is an Outlook account, and it was able to pretty easily log that in. I did try logging in a Google account, and it struggled. Would have had to have manually loaded that in order for it to load successfully, so I'm not quite sure why it was a little more challenged on that. And presumably, if you have an account that isn't Outlook or Google, you should be able to get this on this device. It only has one account at a time, however, so that's one limitation to be aware of. And the only other thing I'll mention about this is if we go ahead and create an email, is that there's only text-based note-taking that's available. You can do handwriting, so if we click on this and we have this familiar keyboard come up, and we have the ability to basically handwrite the input. So I'll go ahead and do that now, right? And see it translates it, but it's still text is what the email will contain. It will not contain, I can't write in this area. It only handles text, whether I do the keyboard or whether I handwrite that in. So that's one limitation to be aware of. And we'll go ahead and discard that. And if I go into the email client itself, which I won't do because I have my account loaded, it's a very straightforward application. There's nothing particularly special about it. It's like any other email application that you've probably used. Now, next up, let's look at files. And just before we get to that, I want to point out a few things about how you get documents onto the device. First off, there is a cloud integration, and if we click on that, you can see that you can integrate with Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. However, it should also be noted that you do need to have a Penstar account in order to be able to do that. So you create the Penstar account, and then you create these, what they call integrations with these services. So you can't use these services without that Penstar account. So that's something important to be aware of. Now let's say that you wanted to import files, but you didn't want to use a cloud-based service. That's fairly easy, and you can use this Wi-Fi transfer app in order to do that. So if I click on this, here you can see some examples of documents that I've loaded previously, but I can go ahead and start a Wi-Fi transfer, and then all I need to do is, if I'm on the same Wi-Fi network as this device, I type in this URL, and into that web browser of the device that has the files I want, and I can easily drag and drop onto this device. And I can actually remove files from this device using this process as well. And as it is with other devices, it's a fairly well done service. It's fairly easy to use to move files back and forth, as long, again, as you're on the same Wi-Fi network. But let's go ahead and go back home, and we'll go into Files and just take a quick look. So first off, this library section actually features preloaded groupings of documents that basically, like books and what have you, that you can read for free on the device. So if I go in here to Adventure and Fantasy, you can see there's a number of EPUB files that are available, and there's actually 4 pages of them here. So a lot of, obviously these are free books that are usually available through Project Gutenberg or what have you, but they are available on this device. So you do have that nice feature of having a number of literary works available by default. If we click on the My Documents, you can go into a little bit of the detail on the device, but you can go even further by clicking on the storage, and you do have these macros for various file types, but you can also click on this and then go right into the file structure, which is represented here. So this is where you would go through the folders and files if you wanted to go through the device in that manner. If we click on this little More button, you can see we have the ability to sort or change the view. Let's go ahead and go to a grid view, for example. There we go. If I click on this little icon here, here's where I can do some of the file management, including deleting or copying or what have you. So that's how you would manage files on this device. Okay, so let's now turn our attention to the note-taking app. And here you can see there's the icon here, and clicking on that is the same as clicking on this top bar, including this circle with the ellipsis. The plus is different though, so we'll get back to that in a second. But if I go ahead and click on that top bar, then we arrive here, and this is basically just a list of existing notes, and it can be categorized in different ways. You have your favorites, which are indicated by the heart, your recents, so those are all the notes I've created, the categories, which are actually folders, so you can create folders here, and there's your icon to do it. If you have any reading notes, and then if you have any notes that were created by date. This is different than the calendar app. So this type of reference to notes that have been created in the past is entirely within the note-taking app. Now we do have, if we go back to recents, we do have some additional settings. So we can do a quick sheet here. So that would get us right into a note without having to go through the macro, which we'll see in a second. We can manage files in aggregate here. So here's an example. We'll go ahead and select a few, and you can see the options. We can move them around. We can export or delete them. We'll go ahead and get out of that. In addition to that, we can change the view. So we're in a list view now. Let's go ahead and move into a grid mode. That's what that would look like. Keep going. We can sort. Those are your sort options right there. Then you've got any type of cloud or backup. You can look into your trash bin for previously deleted files. And then there's some additional settings, which we'll click on here. And those are what those settings are. So those are your basic kind of file navigation within this application. If we go ahead and go back to the home screen, let's click on that plus. And what we'll notice is this is basically what the screen that you enter to establish a new notebook. So here we can just put the title here. We can basically type that in with the keyboard, or we can go ahead and write that in. Let's go ahead and do that. There we go. If I click on this down arrow, it'll give me a list of notes names I've previously used, so I can reuse those. Here I can select whether it's a written notebook or is it going to be a text notebook that you just type in. Here you can set your pen styles, and those are your options there. We'll take a closer look at the pen styles in just a little bit. Here is your eraser type, and then you can clear those options there. You have a note cover that you can create, and then you can also create your templates. Let's take a quick look at those templates. So here is page 1 of the basics. Page 2, we've selected the margin medium, and then here's page 3. If we move along, those are your planning templates, page 1 and 2. Here are your creative templates, page 1 and 2. Here are your lifestyle templates and your custom templates, which in this case you can select from an album, so that goes to your image gallery, or you can create your own template here. Let's go ahead and back out of this, and we'll go ahead and just create the notebook, and that's what a new notebook looks like there. Okay, so we're back on the home screen. I'm just going to illustrate that I can go right into either of these documents here on the widget by just clicking on it. So we'll go ahead and go into pen styles, and here we are. Now, as we just go across the top here, I can back out of the note by clicking on that arrow there. I can reset the template using that icon there, and we've already seen the template options. Here is where you have your stylus options, and I'll just indicate here, I wrote the different options out. So here's the pencil, the ballpoint, the brush, the pen, the dip pen, which is kind of like a calligraphy pen, and then here's your highlighter or marker. Some of them are pressure sensitive, and I've indicated that here. None appear to be tilt sensitive, at least to me. So those are your basic pen styles. These were all written out, by the way, in 5 points fonts. So if I click on further, see I've already highlighted the pen, I'll click on it again, and you can see what the options are that are available. First off, you'll note that you can have up to 5 different presets. So on the main screen, you'll only see the one pen icon, but if you click further, you can quickly go to any one of these 5 presets. Here's your different pen styles listed here. You can manually pick the line size, or you can pick one of these quick defaults. And there are different colors that you can use for these pens. Of course, this is a black and white device. You'd only see these colors for the most part if you exported. Otherwise, they're just different levels of grayscale. Then you have your tail eraser, which is referring to this eraser here, and you can indicate which behaviors you want it to have. I've selected range. There's also this AI scribble erase, and let's go ahead and go to ballpoint, and we'll show that in action. So I'll go ahead and scribble erase this dip pen, and you can see it disappears. So this is the equivalent of the AI erase function on books, and generally I've found it to work pretty good. Let's go ahead and do ballpoint now, and there it goes. A little bit of an artifact, but not too bad. If we move across, we do have our eraser settings, and we'll click on that. And those are your options there, pretty standard. We have our lasso next to that. Let's go ahead and lasso this pencil. And those are your general options, pretty straightforward: cut, copy, delete, or bold. I can also resize it using the corners there. There we go, like so. And I can turn it around using that icon there. Here I can insert an image as well as a text box. I can also select paste here, or I can create any one of these object types. Let's do the triangle, for example, and I'll just go ahead and create the triangle that way. Now, there is an interesting option in this menu, which is this polygon, and if I click on that, it's actually going to create whatever I draw. So I'll tap the button down. You'll see there's a little icon there. I'll tap it again. I'll do it again. And if I stop, I'm going to move to pen. You'll notice that it's going to close that loop and create a triangle, like so. So that's kind of a cool feature because that allows you to draw pretty much whatever you want to draw. Like so. Once it's drawn, there's no way to manipulate it. You would have to use your lasso tool like you would with text. Okay, next up is our page number. So I can actually add a page just by clicking on this arrow like so. And I can also click on this page number to get all the pages listed. I can edit here. I can delete pages, for example. And you can see the options there. So I can move them around, copy, duplicate, insert, delete, and so on. So quite a bit of options available there. And if we go back, you'll notice that there are also bookmarks. You can bookmark note pages. And then there's this thing called content. So I can add a content, and we'll just go ahead and do that. And we'll say hello. We'll misspell it just for fun. And then we'll get out of that, and we'll add the content like so. So now if I go into the page numbering system, I can then actually go to this contents page and see the content. So it's a way of labeling the note. So I could say there's a to-do on this page. I could, whatever I wanted to. I can go ahead and create this shortcut to that thing. It's kind of like creating a tag, but the tag itself is just for the entire page, and the text is specifically written out each time. So it's not as flexible as tags, but it has similar features to tags as you might see them in, like, say, the Remarkable, that also tags the entire page. And then we can go into our recent page numbers there. So quite a bit that you can do there. We can add a page there. So that's essentially duplicating the function of this arrow. Of course, if I'm in a previous page and I click on that arrow, it's just going to advance me to the next page. So this is actually creating a whole new page regardless of where you're at. There's undo and redo. I can click in a voice note. Let's go ahead and do that. Hey Jeff, this is testing the voice note. Let's go ahead and complete it. All right, and let's go ahead and play that. Hey Jeff, this is testing the voice note. Let's go ahead and complete it. All right, I heard that. Hopefully the microphone picked that up as well. And then I can go ahead and minimize all of this by clicking on this icon. Actually, let's go ahead and get rid of this voice note. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and we'll go ahead and delete that. Excellent. So when you collapse the menu, you have pretty much the entire canvas minus this icon here. And remember, there's no touch control. So me tapping that doesn't do anything. I have to use the tip of the stylus in order to return to the system menu. And then if I click on this ellipsis, here's where you can change. This is the name of the file, so I called it pen styles, but I could just rename it. You can zoom in. So it doesn't have infinite canvas, but it does have the ability to zoom in significantly. And let's go ahead, I'll click on this icon. We can go all the way up to 500%, and we can move around using the stylus here on the screen, keeping in mind that it's different than an additional canvas because you are zoomed in. So if we start writing, for example, you can see how exaggerated the writing is. And let's go ahead and zoom out back to 100% and see that's what it looks like using the marker. But that functionality is available to you. We can convert to text. So we can convert the screen to text. And I'm not online. I don't have an account, so you don't need an account in order to do that. So that's all pretty much done on device, although I am connected on Wi-Fi. You can share and export. Let's go ahead and look at those options. So pretty straightforward. If you do share to, those are the options that are available to you. You can set your cover, you can print it, and then you have some additional settings, and those are listed right there. Remember, a category is a file type. And those are the basic functions of the note-taking app. If I click anywhere here on the right corner, I'm going to get my drop-down bar. Okay, I want to go take a quick moment to talk about content and catalogs. So again, clicking on this page number, I have the ability to look at what they call contents, and I can add a content here. And this is the content that I've written here, which says content page. And then it also shows that in this notebook, I have another item called catalog more. So whether I create a content or I create a catalog, they'll appear here on this menu item within a notebook. And you can think of both of these as functioning like a tag. So it's identifying the entire page. If I click on the page, there's no reference on the page. It's the page itself, that's essentially tagged. Very similar in a sense to how Remarkable handles tags. If I click on this ellipsis and I go down to add catalog, I can go ahead and type that in here, and then it will be available in this drop-down bar. I created this catalog more. And you might ask yourself, well, what is the difference then between a content and a catalog? And the answer, since they both appear here, the answer is that the catalog can be searched outside of the notebook, the content cannot. So contents only exist within the notebook, and you can only find them by clicking on this number and going to the Contents tab. But catalogs can be used to search. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll go ahead and search on Page and More and see what happens when we are outside of a notebook. So we'll go ahead and click on this icon. We've got Contents checked. So let's type in Page. And we'll do a search. And it doesn't find anything. However, if we go ahead and type in More and search, it will find that, and then I can link right into that page. So that's the difference fundamentally between the two. If I create this tag, which they call content here, it's only good inside the notebook. But if I go to this More button and create the catalog, that can be searched across notebooks. However, it should be noted, it can only be searched if I remember what I named this. There was no icon in the search bar that talked about existing catalogs that had already been created, right? There's nothing here to do that. So that's just something to be aware of. In that sense, it's not as like Remarkable, where if you searched on tags, they would give you a list of the tags that had already been created. That's not the case here. It's just a feature that you can search on. Now you can search on handwriting as well. And this is, again, in the search feature within the note-taking app. And you do it by enabling the service. And you can, as you can read here, it enables it to read in the background. Doing that will likely have a battery hit. I'll try to measure what that battery hit might be. But it's just something to be aware of. If you want to do search on handwriting, it's available, but it may take a hit on battery life as a result. Okay, let's focus now on our document reader, which they call either Books or Bookshelf. If I click on this icon over here, or I click on anywhere on this top bar, including this ellipsis, it takes me to the same place. And much like Notes, my last two documents are here, and if I clicked on either of these, I would go straight into that document. But let's go ahead and go into the main Bookshelf, and here are all my recent files. You can see the file type is indicated below here on this grid view. If I go ahead and click on this ellipsis, I can go to list mode and look at it that way. Let's go ahead and go back to view mode. It's a little nicer. And then we can go into books, which is just going to have the EPUB, bookmarks, if they're available over here. Excerpts and notes are listed separately. Okay, let's go ahead and go into a PDF. I'm going to go to my favorite, which is this Lecture 17 color. And here we're in the file. If I click on this icon over here, like so, then it opens up the writing icon. So you can zoom out. You've got undo, redo, zoom out, zoom in. You have this hand, which I'm actually not sure what that is. You've got your pen styles up here, which you can identify much like you would in the note-taking app. So similar features around pen styles, thicknesses, either manually or in these presets. And then you have the ability to do colors, which again only show up as grayscales here. You do have the ability to connect, to write different types of objects into this document, as well as the line styles and the same toggles as before. You've got your eraser feature, your lasso. If we click on the more, then there's some additional comments there. If we click on the page numbering there, you can see there's the basically all the pages in the documents. Let's go ahead and go to the back, or rather the front, and there you are. And then if we click on that icon there, let's go ahead and click that again. There's your drop-down bar. And then finally, you can hide this by clicking on the arrow button there. If I click on the X, then I return back to the pen icon. Now the document itself has its own settings, so if I tap in the middle of the document, those will come up, and you can see above, we can go to the home screen, we can go back, we can do a search, we can bookmark, or go into split view. If we click on split view in this context, it's a little different than the split view on the drop-down bar, where we can either have two different documents open, or we can have the document on one and notes on the other. Of course, you've got your positioning, and then it's only going to do it in the landscape mode, so you can identify which way you want that to orient. If we click on more up here, then you'll notice it'll go to your recent files. You can open the excerpt file, look at your annotations, or export the current page. Your basic navigation and formatting is going to be in the bottom. So if we click on the contents, this document doesn't have contents, or bookmarks would be here, and annotations would be there. Let's go ahead and back out of that. We can see another location where we have our progress bar, which is here, so it's down below there. We can also look at the layout where we can change the behavior of the documents. We're set on scroll as opposed to single page. We can determine how it fits on the screen, how we want the margins to be set. You can do a reflow option in this document as well, and you can also change your contrast levels and of course rotate as well. If we click on more, then those are all the items that are available to you. If we go back, and those are your refresh modes. So this is the one time outside of separate applications where you can actually change the refresh mode. And then we can also go down and listen. We can play. Let's go ahead and start playing the document.
Matthew Schwartz, Lecture 17, Color 1, History of Color. You already know that wavelengths of light have different color.
And so on. Okay, and then we can do an excerpt where we can do a screenshot or do OCR on either just what we see or on the entire page, and that's available there. So that's the basics of navigation. Let's go ahead and look at other document types and see how that might differ. And let's go ahead and go into this EPUB. Here we are. We have up here the same type of annotation options that we had earlier, so we won't go over that again. If I click on the document, again, you see pretty much the same options, although there is this annotate button now that's available, which takes you back to this screen. And then you see the same items down below. We should have a table of contents on this one. Yep, and there it is. And it indicates in bold where we are in the document. And you can page through the entire document. And of course, to advance, I could set my buttons to advance, or I can just tap on the screen and it will advance accordingly. All right, let's go ahead then and back out of this document and go into a CBR. Okay, and we'll go ahead and go to the beginning of the document. And now you can see as I pull this menu up, it's a little bit different. The icons look a little different, although the functionality is mostly the same above. And then below, you've just got a little bit of a different option. Let's click on this display option to see what's available there. We can rotate, and then we can also do our adjustments over here with the contrast and darkness and so on. So that's what a comic book can look like. Like I can go in, it's a little dark, for example. So let's go ahead and go in and adjust the contrast down a little bit. See if we can see a little bit more detail. Let's really go down. Let's go all the way to the bottom. There we go. And you can see it's a lot lighter and you can start to make out more detail. Now, before I conclude, I do want to kind of highlight how annotations work on this device. And the first thing I'll note is as long as you're not in the pen tray, then your stylus is a navigation device. So I'm currently on scroll. So if I use my stylus, see, it's just going to move the page, right? And if I was on not on scroll, so let's go ahead and go to single, then using the stylus will advance the page accordingly. But let's go ahead and do some annotations. I'm going to go ahead and click on this button. I'm happy with what I've got, so I'm just going to go ahead and write hello. All right, and now let's go ahead and back out of that. And if I click on the through the menu, and I'm going to go to Contents, then here under Annotations, there's where the hello is indicated, and it can take me right there. So you don't see the annotations in the menu, but it does provide a hyperlink to take you to where you wrote that annotation. So that's basically how marking up documents works on this device. Okay, so that concludes the visual tour, and then we're going to next go into the final phase of the review series, which is my actual review itself. I'll give you the battery test results, the primary and secondary pros and cons of the device, and finally just my overall recommendation, who I think it's for and not for, as the case may be. So I'll see you in that video, which will drop in a week or so. Until then, have a great day.